You know, Justin Bieber had a post the other day on his Instagram talking about all the drugs that he did when he was younger and how much it fucked him up. And now he's got a relationship with the Lord, and he's got, you know, he's married and he's trying to be a normal person.
Yeah.
But he's struggling with the fact that he was insanely famous when he was a kid.
What's going on with you guys? Are you working together?
I'm not. I mean, I think that we become friends in a strange way, you know.
Like Rob and Big.
Yeah. It's like exactly.
I'm Big and you're Rob.
Yeah. No, I mean, to a lot of us, he's like a little brother. You know what I'm saying? He's not afraid to call and ask for advice. He's somebody that, in the industry-wise, the record industry is a strong family, and he's somebody that, you know, we definitely have our arms around, and we want to protect him because he's such genuinely a nice person. Besides his talent, you know what I'm saying? He's one of the greatest kids that you could ever know.
You know, Diddy bought his son a Bentley. Maybe, you know, he could buy you one also while you're out.
Got me a Lamborghini.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
Yeah, I know. When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last
He
time.
had the Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than to be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
Well, apparently not.
I always say this about Justin Bieber. When people hear about him going insane, like, of course he's going insane. You have no idea what it would be like to be him and to be 17 years old. And girls literally trying to break into his house. They're coming down chimneys. They're flying in on parachutes. They're doing anything they can. They just want to be around him. You want him to be normal?
Oh, man, poor guy.
Months ago, I was really struggling mentally and emotionally, and just there was so many things that were adding up, and I wasn't able to enjoy any of the things that I owned.
That stuff's not gonna matter to you.
None of the actual things did anything because I was so hurt and I was so confused and I was so sick, and there was all these things, and I was like, I can't, you know, there's like, you just can't, like you said, you can't enjoy the actual physical, tangible, like, things that money offers, right? Like, it really had to come from within. So that's I guess our perspective.
The you of then was on a path of self-destruction.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would have, for sure, 100%. Yeah, it would have been no. It was bad. I don't know if I'd be alive, for sure.
So check this out, yo. Justin, you ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, you know, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream. You know, I have been given custody of him. You know, he signed to Usher.
I'm signed to Usher.
I had legal guardianship of Usher when you know he did his first album. I did Usher's first album. I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me.
They're not seeing the victim. They're not seeing that boy that got rushed to the hospital. They're not seeing what the intentions was in his heart when he took Justin Bieber there.
Oh.
Let's be honest. He took Justin Bieber there. Diddy had been trying to get to Bieber for a minute, and his management was backing him off. But it wasn't until Usher took over management and had guardianship and gave temporary guardianship to the diddler for 48 hours. Think about that.
What's up, man? You good?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, young brother, everything's good?
Everything's
Selling
great.
out arenas and everything? Starting to act different, huh? You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Well, I mean, you try to get in contact with me, you know, through all my, partners and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But you never really got my number, so.
Right. Okay.
My number?
Yeah.
So many horrific accusations, though, involving young singers, like children.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's insane.
He makes R. Kelly look like a decent guy.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
It is crazy. And meanwhile, the guy was like hanging out with Oprah, hanging out with Obama.
Jay-Z,
everybody.
Dude, nobody expected it to go this far. What started as whispers online suddenly exploded into something way bigger. And this time, it wasn't just gossip. It felt like the walls of the entire industry were starting to shake. It all hit another level the moment Joe Rogan leaned forward on his podcast, paused for a second, and said something that made everyone listening freeze. If even half of this is true, this is insane. And just like that, millions of people were locked in. Because only hours before that episode aired, Justin Bieber had made statements that sent the internet into a frenzy. Not a polished interview, not some scripted press release, but raw, emotional, and honestly, a little unsettling. And suddenly, one name kept coming up over and over again: Diddy. But here's the thing. This story didn't just appear out of nowhere. To really understand why people reacted the way they did, you have to go back, way back. Because for years, Diddy wasn't just another celebrity. He was power, influence, a gatekeeper in the music industry, the kind of person who could make or break careers with a single phone call. Artists looked up to him, feared him, respected him. He built an empire. From music to business to culture, his name carried weight everywhere. And Justin Bieber, he was the opposite in the beginning. A kid, discovered young, thrown into fame before he even had time to understand what it meant, surrounded by adults, powerful people, industry giants, people who promised guidance, mentorship, protection. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because when young artists enter that world, they don't always see the full picture. They trust the people around them. They follow directions. They believe they're being helped. But sometimes, what looks like guidance can feel very different years later. And that's exactly what made Justin's recent words hit so hard. He didn't come out making wild accusations. He didn't name things in a clean, easy-to-understand way. Instead, it was fragments, emotions, moments that didn't sit right, and people listening started connecting dots on their own. Then came Joe Rogan, and if you know anything about Rogan, you know he doesn't usually hold back when something feels off to him. That episode, it wasn't calm, it wasn't casual. You could hear it in his voice. Something bothered him. This is the kind of stuff people ignore for years, he said, until suddenly they can't anymore. But here's the twist. He wasn't just reacting, he was questioning everything. He started pulling apart the timeline, talking about how young artists are introduced into these powerful circles, how influence works behind closed doors, how silence becomes normal. And then he said something that made the internet go crazy. Why does this story keep repeating? That line right there, it stuck. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about one person or one moment. It felt bigger. People online started digging. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips, photos, stories that had been ignored for years suddenly looked different. Not because they proved anything, but because now people were looking at them with a new perspective. And that's when things started getting messy. Because once the internet starts asking questions, it doesn't stop. Some defended Diddy immediately, saying this was all speculation, that people were twisting words, creating narratives that weren't confirmed. Others weren't so sure. They pointed at patterns, at the culture of silence in the industry, at how often stories like this only come out years later, when it's finally safe to speak. And right in the middle of all this noise, Joe Rogan kept pushing. "We've seen this before," he said. "Not the exact same story, but the same structure. Power, influence, silence." He wasn't accusing, he was analyzing. But honestly, that almost made it more intense. Because instead of telling people what to think, he was asking them to think for themselves. And that made everything feel heavier. Then came the part that really shook listeners. He paused, took a breath, and said, "If someone's trying to tell you something without saying it directly, you should probably listen carefully." And just like that, the conversation shifted again. This wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about interpretation, about reading between the lines. And Bieber's emotional tone suddenly became the center of attention. People started replaying his words, his expressions, the way he spoke. not looking for drama, but looking for meaning.
Instead, it was fragments, emotions, moments that didn't sit right, and people listening started connecting dots on their own. Then came Joe Rogan, and if you know anything about Rogan, you know he doesn't usually hold back when something feels off to him. That episode, it wasn't calm, it wasn't casual. You could hear it in his voice. Something bothered him. This is the kind of stuff people ignore for years, he said, until suddenly they can't anymore. But here's the twist. He wasn't just reacting, he was questioning everything. He started pulling apart the timeline, talking about how young artists are introduced into these powerful circles, how influence works behind closed doors, how silence becomes normal. And then he said something that made the internet go crazy. Why does this story keep repeating? That line right there, it stuck, because suddenly this wasn't just about one person or one moment. It felt bigger. People online started digging. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips, photos, stories that had been ignored for years suddenly looked different. Not because they proved anything, but because now people were looking at them with a new perspective. And that's when things started getting messy. Because once the internet starts asking questions, it doesn't stop. Some defended Diddy immediately, saying this was all speculation, that people were twisting words, creating narratives that weren't confirmed. Others weren't so sure. They pointed at patterns, at the culture of silence in the industry, at how often stories like this only come out years later, when it's finally safe to speak. And right in the middle of all this noise, Joe Rogan kept pushing. "We've seen this before," he said. "Not the exact same story, but the same structure. Power, influence, silence." He wasn't accusing, he was analyzing. But honestly, that almost made it more intense, because instead of telling people what to think, he was asking them to think for themselves, and that made everything feel heavier. Then came the part that really shook listeners. He paused, took a breath, and said, "If someone's trying to tell you something without saying it directly, you should probably listen carefully." And just like that, the conversation shifted again. This wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about interpretation, about reading between the lines. And Bieber's emotional tone suddenly became the center of attention. People started replaying his words, his expressions, the way he spoke, not looking for drama, but looking for meaning. Because it's easy to consume celebrity news like entertainment. But stories like this remind people that behind the headlines are real lives, real experiences, real consequences. And maybe the most uncomfortable part of all is realizing how often things stay hidden until someone finally speaks, even a little. And that brings us here. Because no matter what happens next, whether more details come out or everything fades away, this moment already changed something. It made people look closer, listen harder, question more. And maybe that's why Joe Rogan's reaction felt so intense. Not because he had all the answers, but because he understood the weight of the questions. He ended the episode with something simple but powerful. Truth has a way of coming out, eventually. And then he paused, looked straight ahead, and added, "The real question is, who's ready to hear it?" And just like that, the conversation didn't end, it just got louder. And when you really sit back and think about everything that just unfolded, it doesn't feel like a normal celebrity story anymore. It feels bigger than that. Because this isn't just about headlines or viral clips or who said what on a podcast. It's about the kind of truth that doesn't come out all at once, the kind that shows itself slowly, piece by piece, until people can't ignore it anymore. What makes this moment so powerful isn't that we have all the answers. It's that for the first time in a long time, people are actually asking the right questions. And that changes everything.
Because silence used to protect powerful people. It used to bury uncomfortable stories. It used to make things disappear before they ever reached the surface. But now every word, every reaction, every pause gets noticed.
And when someone like Justin Bieber speaks, even carefully, even emotionally, even without saying everything directly, people listen differently. And when someone like Joe Rogan reacts the way he did, questioning, analyzing, refusing to just brush it off, it adds fuel to something much bigger than just a conversation. It becomes a moment, a shift. And maybe that's what we're really witnessing right now. Not the end of a story, but the beginning of something being exposed layer by layer. Because the truth doesn't always come out in one loud explosion. Sometimes it leaks. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up in body language, in tone, in the things people struggle to say out loud. And if there's one thing this whole situation has proven, it's that people are starting to pay attention to those details more than ever before. So the real question isn't just what happened. The real question is, what else hasn't come out yet? And who else knows more than they're saying? Because history has shown us moments like this don't just disappear. They build, they grow, and eventually they force the truth into the light. So stay alert, stay curious, and most importantly, don't just accept things at face value. Because sometimes the biggest stories are hidden between the lines. And trust me, this one, it's far from over. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't just another video. It's a conversation that's only getting started. So go ahead and hit that like button if you want more deep dives like this. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss what comes next. Because the next part of this story, it might be even bigger than what we just talked about, and you don't want to be the one hearing about it late.